You've been lied to about attraction. Every piece of advice you've consumed, every strategy you've memorized, every technique you've practiced, it's all been surface-level theater. A performance for those who mistake kindness for weakness, availability for value, and transparency for authenticity. But there exists a different breed of man. One who operates in the shadows of human psychology, who understands that desire isn't born from comfort, it's forged in the fires of uncertainty, scarcity, and controlled danger. You see him in the corner of every room, speaking less, but commanding more attention. His phone doesn't buzz with desperate messages because he's created something far more powerful than availability. He's created hunger. While other men chase, validate, and perform emotional labor for scraps of attention, he sits in his throne of detachment, watching the world orbit around his gravitational pull. This isn't about cruelty. This isn't about manipulation in its crude, obvious forms. This is about understanding the ancient primal language that the feminine psyche has been hardwired to respond to since the dawn of civilization. A language that speaks not through words, but through presence, not through gifts, but through absence, not through reassurance, but through mystery. The dangerous man knows what you're only beginning to discover, that attraction is not a negotiation. It's not a transaction where kindness equals desire, where availability equals value, where emotional labor equals love. Attraction is a psychological battlefield where the one who needs less controls more. Look around you. Every man you know is playing by rules that guarantee his defeat. They text back immediately, they make themselves constantly available, they seek approval, they explain their worth, they justify their actions, they apologize for their desires. They've been conditioned to believe that being a good man means being a weak man, that being kind means being controllable, that being available means being valuable. But deep in your bones, you know this isn't true. You've felt the power of the moments when you pulled back, when you said no, when you disappeared for days and returned to find the dynamic shifted entirely in your favor. You've tasted the intoxicating rush of being pursued rather than pursuing, of being chosen rather than choosing. The dangerous man has weaponized this knowledge. He's turned his understanding of human psychology into a form of quiet warfare, not against women, but against the weak version of himself that once begged for attention, that once believed his worth was determined by how much he could give, rather than how much he could withhold. He's learned the most dangerous truth of all, that in a world full of available men, the unavailable man becomes a god. In a sea of predictable responses, the unpredictable man becomes irresistible. In an environment of emotional neediness, the emotionally detached man becomes magnetic. This is your invitation into a different reality, one where your silence speaks louder than your words, where your absence creates more desire than your presence, where your emotional unavailability becomes the very thing that makes you emotionally irresistible. You're about to learn why the most dangerous men aren't dangerous because they harm others. They're dangerous because they've mastered the art of not needing others. And in that mastery, they've discovered the secret that transforms the hunted into the hunter, the pursued into the pursuer, the powerless into the powerful. The game is about to change. Are you ready to play by different rules? Distance is your most lethal weapon. Not the distance of abandonment, but the calculated space that transforms you from pursuer into prize. The dangerous man understands what your needy mind refuses to accept. That presence without absence is worthless. That availability without scarcity is powerless. That attention without withdrawal is meaningless. You've been programmed to believe that love means constant contact, that interest means immediate response, that care means perpetual availability. But observe the world around you. What do people fight for? What do they crave? What keeps them awake at night, thinking, wondering, obsessing, the things they cannot have? the people they cannot reach, the experiences they cannot control. Every text you send immediately destroys a piece of your power. Every call you answer on the first ring diminishes your value. Every invitation you accept without hesitation makes you common. You've been living in a paradigm where responsiveness equals respect, where availability equals affection, where accessibility equals attraction. This is the thinking of the powerless. The dangerous man operates from a different frequency. He understands that the human psyche is wired for pursuit, not possession, that the feminine mind is designed to wonder, to question, to fill in the gaps of mystery with fantasies more powerful than any reality you could provide through constant presence. When you disappear for 3 days, her mind doesn't go quiet. It goes to work. It creates stories about where you are, what you're doing, who you're with. It manufactures scenarios more compelling than any conversation you could have had. It builds a version of you that's more interesting, more mysterious, more valuable than the version that would have been available every moment. This is psychological alchemy. You're transforming the base metal of your ordinary presence into the gold of your extraordinary absence. But distance isn't just about physical or digital unavailability. It's about emotional withdrawal. It's about the space you create between your inner world and your outer expressions. The dangerous man never reveals his full hand. He never shows the complete picture of his thoughts, his plans, his feelings. He operates from a place of strategic incompleteness, leaving gaps that her imagination must fill. You've been taught that vulnerability means emotional transparency, that intimacy means total openness, that connection means constant communication. But true power comes from the things you don't say, the emotions you don't express, the thoughts you keep locked away in the fortress of your inner kingdom. When she asks what you're thinking and you smile and say, "Nothing important," you're not being dismissive. You're being strategic. You're maintaining the very mystery that drew her to you in the first place. You're protecting the space that allows her mind to wander, to wonder, to work. The weak man fears that distance will make him forgotten. The dangerous man knows that distance makes him unforgettable. The weak man believes that absence decreases his value. The dangerous man understands that absence multiplies his worth exponentially. This isn't about playing games. This is about recognizing the fundamental truth that governs all human desire. We pursue what pursues us least. We value what values us strategically. We become obsessed with what remains just beyond our reach. Your calculated distance isn't cruelty. It's kindness to the part of her that needs to feel the thrill of uncertainty, the excitement of pursuit, the satisfaction of earning rather than being given. You're not withholding love. You're creating the conditions where love can flourish in its most intense, most primal form. The dangerous man has learned to love from a distance that preserves desire, to care from a space that maintains mystery, to connect from a position that protects power. Distance isn't the opposite of intimacy. It's the foundation upon which real intimacy is built. Comfort is the silent killer of desire. Every moment you spend reassuring her, validating her emotions, and smoothing over her discomfort, you're performing the ritual that transforms passion into indifference. You're becoming the emotional safe house that she visits when she needs healing, but never the storm that makes her feel alive. The dangerous man understands what your well-meaning mind refuses to accept, that the feminine psyche is not designed to be at peace with you. It's designed to be in a constant state of productive tension, of beautiful uncertainty, of exquisite emotional movement. When you eliminate that tension through constant validation, you don't create love. You create emotional death. You've been conditioned to believe that being a good man means being her emotional support system, her constant source of reassurance, her reliable dispenser of comfort. But watch what happens when you become too available emotionally. Watch how her texts become shorter, her calls less frequent, her eyes less bright when she looks at you. You've accidentally trained her to take your emotional presence for granted. The dangerous man operates from a different understanding. He knows that emotional predictability is the enemy of emotional intensity. That when she can always count on your validation, your reassurance, your emotional availability, she stops needing to work for it. She stops appreciating it. She stops craving it. This is why your emotional unavailability becomes more powerful than your emotional generosity. Not because you're being cruel, but because you're refusing to participate in the dynamic that slowly suffocates attraction when she comes to you with her problems, seeking your immediate comfort, and you listen but don't rush to fix, don't hurry to reassure, don't scramble to validate. Something profound happens. You create space, you create tension, you create the conditions where she must find her own emotional equilibrium, where she must work for your approval, where she must earn your emotional investment. This isn't about withholding love. This is about understanding that love without challenge becomes meaningless, that care without criteria becomes worthless, that attention without earned investment becomes powerless. The dangerous man has learned to love like a storm, not like a shelter, to care like fire, not like a blanket, to connect like lightning, not like a steady lamp. He understands that the feminine soul is awakened not by emotional predictability, but by emotional intensity, not by constant comfort, but by waves of connection and space, validation and challenge, warmth and withdrawal. Your emotional inconsistency isn't instability. It's intelligence. It's the recognition that humans are wired to pursue what they cannot fully possess, to crave what they cannot completely control, to become obsessed with what remains just beyond their emotional reach. When you refuse to be her emotional constant, you force her to become emotionally creative. When you don't immediately validate her feelings, you create space for her to validate herself. When you don't rush to comfort her discomfort, you allow her to discover her own emotional strength. This is the alchemy, transforming her emotional dependence into emotional hunger, converting her need for your comfort into her craving for your approval, transmuting her expectation of your validation into her appreciation of your rare moments of emotional generosity. The weak man gives his emotions away freely, believing that generosity creates gratitude. The dangerous man portions his emotions strategically, knowing that scarcity creates value. The weak man comforts constantly, thinking that comfort creates connection. The dangerous man creates productive discomfort, understanding that tension creates attraction. You're not becoming emotionally unavailable to be cruel. You're becoming emotionally selective to be powerful. You're not withholding validation to hurt her. You're creating the conditions where your validation becomes precious, where your emotional investment becomes meaningful, where your care becomes something she must earn rather than something she can expect. Emotional alchemy is the art of transforming the base metal of expected comfort into the gold of earned connection. You've been conditioned to believe that authority requires noise. That power demands performance. That respect is earned through demonstration, through proving yourself in the arena of other people's expectations. This is the lie that keeps you weak. True authority whispers. It doesn't announce itself because it doesn't need to. It exists in the space between words, in the pause before you speak, in the way you hold silence like a weapon only you know how to wield. Watch how desperate people become when they can't read you, when your thoughts remain locked behind eyes that reveal nothing, when your next move exists only in the theater of their imagination. This is the doctrine of unspoken authority, the recognition that your most dangerous power lives not in what you say, but in what you choose not to reveal. People are magnetically drawn to mystery because mystery implies depth. And depth implies something they lack, something they hunger for but cannot name, something that exists beyond their reach, beyond their understanding, beyond their ability to manipulate or control. Your silence becomes their obsession. Think about the last time you encountered someone who seemed to carry secrets,
who spoke only when their words would cut deepest, who moved through the world with an inner certainty that required no external validation. You couldn't look away, could you? This is the gravitational pull of contained power. The psychological
magnetism of a mind that operates on frequencies others cannot access. You become a puzzle they desperately need to solve, a code they must crack, a mystery that haunts their thoughts long after you've left the room. But here's what they don't understand. Your mystery isn't manufactured. It's the natural result of depth, of having descended into your own psychological underworld and emerged with knowledge that cannot be spoken, cannot be explained, can only be lived. You've touched something they've never even imagined exists. This is why the loudest voices in the room are always the weakest, why the most insecure people perform their authority like a theatre production. They mistake volume for power, demonstration for dominance, explanation for expertise. They reveal their hand because they have no choice. Because without constant validation, without perpetual proving, they cease to exist in their own minds. You are not them. Your authority exists independent of their recognition. Your power operates beyond their comprehension. Your value transcends their ability to measure or assign worth. You carry yourself with the quiet confidence of someone who has looked into the abyss and discovered it was just another room in the eye house of your own consciousness, just another space you've learned to navigate, just another territory you've conquered, without anyone else even knowing the war was being fought. This inner certainty radiates outward like heat from a hidden fire. People feel it before they see it. They sense something in your presence that they cannot name but cannot ignore, something that makes them lean in, something that makes them want to be closer to whatever secret knowledge you possess. They don't realize they're being pulled into your orbit. They don't understand that their fascination is not accidental, that their curiosity is not random, that their need to understand you is actually their recognition of your superiority. You have become the gravitational center of their psychological universe. This is the doctrine of unspoken authority, the understanding that true power never needs to announce itself. That genuine strength speaks in frequencies only other strong people can hear. That real authority exists in the space between what you could say and what you choose not to reveal. You are not here to perform your worth. You are here to embody it, to carry it like a loaded weapon that never needs to be drawn, to move through the world with the quiet confidence of someone who has nothing to prove because they have everything to offer. And in that silence, in that beautiful, terrible silence, you become absolutely unstoppable. You give yourself away too easily. Your time, your energy, your emotional investment. You scatter these precious resources like coins thrown to beggars, never realizing that each careless expenditure diminishes your power. This is the mistake that keeps you ordinary. What is freely given is never valued. What is easily obtained is immediately dismissed. What requires no effort to acquire becomes worthless in the holder's hands. This is not cruelty. This is psychology. This is the immutable law of human nature you've been too naive to understand. Your attention is not a right others can claim. It is a privilege they must earn. Think about the last time someone fought for your focus, not demanded it, not expected it, but actually fought for it, proved themselves worthy of it, demonstrated through their actions that they understood the sacred nature of what they were asking for. You remember them differently, don't you? They exist in your memory with more weight, more significance, more gravitational pull than those who assumed your attention was their birthright. This is the philosophy of selective investment, the understanding that your emotional resources are finite, that your energy is sacred, that your time is the most valuable currency you possess, and you've been spending it like a fool. When you make yourself available to everyone, you become valuable to no one. When you invest equally in all relationships, you create depth in none. When you offer your attention without discrimination, you teach the world that your focus has no worth. You become psychologically invisible. But when you become selective, when you begin to treat your attention like the rare and precious resource it truly is, when you start requiring people to prove their worthiness before they gain access to your inner world, something profound shifts. Suddenly, you become scarce. Suddenly, you become valuable. Suddenly, your presence carries weight because your absence has meaning. People begin to hunger for what you used to give freely. They start to compete for what they once took for granted. They begin to understand that access to you is not a guarantee, but a gift that must be earned and re-earned through consistent demonstration of value. This is not manipulation. This is self-respect translated into action. You are not here to be everyone's emotional dumping ground. You are not here to solve problems for people who wouldn't solve yours. You are not here to invest in relationships with those who see your investment as obligation rather than privilege. Your self-worth is not determined by how much you give. It is determined by how much you value what you have to offer. When you truly understand your own worth, when you recognize that your time, your energy, your emotional investment are precious beyond measure, when you realize that you are not a charity case but a rare and valuable resource, your entire relationship with the world transforms. You stop chasing, you stop proving, you stop performing your worth for people who wouldn't recognize value if it announced itself with trumpets and fanfare. Instead, you begin to attract. You begin to draw in those who understand quality, those who recognize rarity, those who know that the best things in life are not freely given, but carefully earned. This is the magnetism of selective investment, the attractive force of someone who knows their worth and refuses to negotiate it downward to accommodate other people's limitations. You become the prize they compete for instead of the competitor desperately seeking their approval. Your attention becomes sacred because you treat it as sacred. Your time becomes valuable because you refuse to waste it on unworthy investments. Your energy becomes magnetic because you direct it only toward people and purposes that match your frequency. This is not about becoming cold or calculating. This is about becoming conscious, about recognizing that your resources are finite and your worth is infinite, and that these two truths must inform every decision you make about where you invest your life force. You are not here to be available to everyone. You are here to be invaluable to those who deserve access to your world. Make them earn it. Make them prove it. Make them understand that proximity to you is not a right, but a responsibility they must demonstrate they're capable of handling. Your attention is sacred. Treat it accordingly. You've been living in the extremes, either completely predictable or dangerously unstable, either boringly safe or recklessly chaotic, either the reliable friend they take for granted or the unpredictable storm they fear and flee from. This is why you fail to captivate. True magnetism lives in the space between safety and danger, in the delicate balance between the known and the unknown, in the psychological sweet spot where excitement meets security, where adventure intersects with stability. You must become both the storm and the shelter. People crave predictability because it feels safe, but they hunger for unpredictability because it feels alive. They want someone they can trust completely, but they also want someone who can surprise them, challenge them, take them to places they've never been before. This is the paradox that destroys weak men and creates legends. Watch how people respond to someone who embodies controlled chaos. Someone who is dangerous enough to be thrilling but stable enough to be trusted. Someone who can lead them into unknown territories while ensuring they return home safely. They become addicted to this person's presence. It's not the danger alone that captivates them. Any fool can be dangerous. Any weakling can create chaos. Any coward can burn bridges and call it strength. It's the control that makes the danger intoxicating. When you demonstrate that you can harness chaos without being consumed by it, when you show that you can be unpredictable without being unreliable, when you prove that you can create excitement without sacrificing security, you become irresistible. You become the perfect psychological cocktail they cannot find anywhere else. This is mastery-level attraction. The understanding that human beings are complex creatures who need both stability and stimulation, both comfort and challenge, both safety and adventure. You give them both. You are the steady hand that guides them through uncertain terrain, the calm voice that speaks wisdom in the eye of the storm, the unshakable presence that remains constant even as everything around you shifts and changes, but you are also the unexpected move that catches them off guard, the spontaneous decision that leads to unforgettable experiences, and the controlled rebellion that breaks them free from the prison of their own routines. You teach them that danger and safety are not opposites. They are dance partners. They are complementary forces that, when properly balanced, create something more powerful than either could achieve alone. This is why boring men repel and chaotic men exhaust. Why safe men get friend-zoned and dangerous men get feared. Why predictable men get ignored and unpredictable men get avoided. They exist in the extremes. You exist in the synthesis. You have learned to calibrate your chaos with surgical precision, to deliver exactly the right amount of unpredictability to keep them engaged without overwhelming them, to provide exactly the right amount of stability to keep them secure without boring them. You read the room. You sense the moment. You understand when to lean into safety and when to lean into danger. When to be the rock they can depend on, and when to be the storm that awakens their dormant life force. This is not manipulation, this is mastery. This is the sophisticated understanding that attraction is not about being one thing consistently, but about being the right thing at the right time. You become their sanctuary and their adventure, their peace and their excitement, their home and their escape. You are dangerous enough to keep them alive, but safe enough to keep them close. Unpredictable enough to keep them guessing, but reliable enough to keep them trusting. This is the mastery of controlled chaos. The understanding that true power lies not in being purely one thing or another, but in being able to embody whatever the moment requires, while never losing sight of who you are at your core. You are not chaos. You are not order. You are the conscious wielder of both, the master of psychological alchemy, who transforms opposing forces into magnetic gold. They will never be able to fully predict you, but they will always be able to trust you. And in that perfect balance between mystery and certainty, between danger and safety, you become absolutely unforgettable. The throne of inner sovereignty. Spiritual mastery as ultimate attraction. Everything you've learned until now has been preparation for this moment. The silence, the selective investment, the controlled chaos. These are not techniques to be practiced, but reflections of a deeper truth to be embodied. You are not learning to attract. You are learning to become. The ultimate magnetism does not come from what you do. It comes from who you are when no one is watching, when the performance ends and the masks fall away, when you are alone with your thoughts, your fears, your deepest shadows. This is where the real work begins. You see, every person you've ever been drawn to, every individual who possessed that indefinable quality that made them impossible to ignore, They had one thing in common. They had conquered themselves. They had descended into their own psychological underworld and emerged victorious. They had claimed the throne of their own inner sovereignty. This is not about perfection. This is about integration. About facing the parts of yourself you've been running from since childhood. About making peace with the darkness that lives inside you instead of pretending it doesn't exist. About becoming whole. When you stop needing external validation to feel worthy. When you stop requiring other people's approval to feel valuable. When you stop depending on external circumstances to feel secure, something profound happens. You become magnetic, not because you're trying to be, but because you can't help but be. This is the paradox of true attraction. The more you need nothing from others, the more they need everything from you. The more complete you become within yourself, the more desperately they want to be part of your completeness. You become the very thing they've been searching for in all the wrong places. But here's what they don't understand. You didn't become this way to attract them. You became this way to honor yourself, to live with integrity, to walk through the world as a sovereign being, rather than a psychological slave begging for scraps of attention and approval. You did the work not for them, but for you. This is why techniques fail and presence succeeds. Why performance exhausts and authenticity energizes. Why manipulation creates temporary results and mastery creates lasting transformation. You cannot fake inner sovereignty. You cannot perform psychological integration. You cannot pretend to be whole while remaining fragmented inside. The work is real. The transformation is real. The mastery is real. When you have truly conquered your own fears, when you have integrated your shadow and made peace with your darkness, when you have learned to love yourself not despite your flaws, but because of your humanity, you radiate something that cannot be taught or learned or copied. You radiate truth, and truth is the ultimate aphrodisiac. Truth is the ultimate magnetic force. Truth is what people have been desperately seeking their entire lives without ever knowing how to name it. You become a living example of what they could be if they had the courage to do the work you've done. A walking reminder of the potential that lives dormant within them. A mirror reflecting back their own untapped sovereignty. This is why they cannot look away. This is why they cannot forget you. This is why they cannot find what you offer in anyone else. You are not offering them a person. You are offering them a possibility, a glimpse of what life looks like when lived from a place of inner mastery rather than external dependency. You are showing them what freedom looks like in human form. This is the throne of inner sovereignty. The understanding that all external power is merely a reflection of internal mastery. That all attraction is simply the recognition of someone who has done the work most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You have faced your demons and made them allies. You have explored your darkness and integrated it into your light. You have descended into your own psychological hell and emerged not broken, but forged. You have become dangerous not because you can hurt others, but because you can no longer be hurt by them. Not because you can manipulate their emotions, but because you can no longer be manipulated by your own. You have claimed your throne, you have crowned yourself, you have become the sovereign ruler of your own psychological kingdom. And from that throne, from that place of absolute inner authority, you attract not because you need to, but because you cannot help but draw others toward the light of your own self-mastery. This is who you were always meant to become. This is the work you were born to do. This is the throne that has been waiting for you since the moment you first opened your eyes. Claim it. The world is watching. The world is waiting. The world needs to see what sovereignty looks like. When it walks among mortals, you are no longer one of them. You are who they aspire to become.